years ago. Now, why is that? Because this lesson was preached from this pulpit by me 2 years ago. So why would I ever reuse a lesson? Well, because it is important enough to reuse. And in this case, it has been just over 2 years since we heard this, which means that none of us remember what was said. Isn't that great? But we get an opportunity to review what it looks like to set spiritual goals. And that's what we're going to take a look at tonight. Now, for myself, I actually like goal setting. As strange as that may seem, it's something that I enjoy doing. And I have goals that are for today, goals for this week, goals for this year, goals that won't happen for 50 years. But I have goals that are way out into the future sometimes. And those goals are in, of course, a lot of different areas in life. But as far as we're talking about, we're looking at spiritual goals, which should be the first priority of someone who is a Christian, to have goals that will help them to grow spiritually. Now, you also have a handout, I think. Does anyone not have a handout? Okay. Mandy does not have a handout. We will have that brought your way. Yep. All right, perfect. So, everyone now has a handout, and on these handouts, there's a very basic outline of what we're talking about this evening, and as well as that, there's also a spot at the bottom where you can set some of your own spiritually minded goals, which we'll be doing hopefully toward the end of this, but I do actually expect that will be filled out. Why? Because if you don't do that, you will not accomplish anything. You will not accomplish any goal if you do not write it out. And we'll talk about that as we go through. But we are going to take a look at this right now, starting with the importance of setting goals. Okay, so the first reason that you should ever set any kind of goal is because according to the Bible, goals and plans alongside those goals bring about success. In Proverbs chapter 21, verse 5, it says that the plans of the diligent lead surely to plenty, but those of everyone who is hasty surely to poverty. So there is a big difference between those who are diligent in their planning and those who really don't take it very seriously. And one will lead to plenty. One will have success and abundance, and the other will have nothing. Leads to poverty. And the principle here can be applied spiritually just as easily. If you have plans, spiritually speaking, if you have goals, it will lead to plenty. It will lead to an abundance spiritually. And if you do not, what is the result? The result is spiritual poverty, a place that none of us want to end up. For some reason, with success and goal planning and the effort that we have to put in, I think most of us understand that in a lot of areas of life. So if you're talking about physical health, most of us understand that there's a direct connection to the amount of planning and then effort that you put into it and the result that you get. Now, that doesn't mean we necessarily act on it, but we do at least understand that there is that connection. And the same thing would be true in financial terms. We understand that our decisions lead to benefits or to disaster financially, depending on how diligent we are with that. Same thing could be said of our careers or in school or whatever area you want to look at. But there are two areas that for some reason doesn't seem to hold true. One of them is marriage. For some reason with marriage, it seems that people think, okay, I'll get married and everything will fall into place. Usually people that have that idea and stick with that idea and never set goals even for their marriage will end up with divorce or with an unhappy marriage. And certainly spiritually, the same thing would hold true. If I think of my Christianity as being something that will just fall into place and that everything will just work out on its own, or that the church will provide for me spiritually without me having to lift a finger, then ultimately I'm going to end up as a mediocre Christian at best or a non-Christian at worst. Another part of the importance that we have of setting goals is the examples that we see in Scripture, and we're not going to look at every example of someone setting a goal in Scripture, but two important examples. The first one comes from God. I don't know if you've ever thought of God as being someone that sets goals, but he is a goal setter. He has purposes. We usually refer to it as his will, but it's just as accurate to refer to it as God's plans and God's goals. One goal of God is explained in 2 Peter chapter 3 and verse 9. It says that the Lord is not slack or slow concerning his promise, as some count it, but is long-suffering, is patient toward us, not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. God's goal is that everyone would come to him in repentance. Now, humans have a tendency to mess that up, but that is a goal that God has. In a specific instance, and not even necessarily in fully spiritual terms, but as far as Paul is concerned, he is someone that also set goals. And Paul, in our text here in Romans chapter 15, has a goal, a specific goal. We'll actually start in verse 23. He says, "But now, no longer having a place in these parts, and having a great desire these many years to come to you, whenever I journey to Spain, I shall come to you. For I hope to see you on my journey, and to be helped on my way there by you." So Paul is relating his plan to go both to Rome and eventually to go on to Spain. Now, this is a spiritual goal, I suppose, in the sense that he's going there to strengthen the church in Rome and eventually in Spain. So Paul has goals. He sets goals. Is it possible that Paul would end up in Rome by chance? Is it possible that Paul would end up in Spain just by chance? And of course, we can ask the same thing for ourselves. Is it likely that you will wake up one morning in Spain very confused? Seems doubtful. Instead, we would have to intentionally make the effort if we were going to get there. And that's true of any goal setting that we do. We will arrive where we are at by the choices that we make, not by chance there. So that's certainly true for Paul, but it's also true for us. One other passage that we need to look at, because some people would say that it might be contrary to the idea of setting goals, is in James chapter 4. In James chapter 4, starting verse 13, we'll read just a little bit. It says, "Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a city, and spend a year there, and buy and sell, and make a profit." Verse 14, "Whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow. For what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or that." Again, some people would suggest that this text prohibits or precludes the idea of setting goals or planning things out. And they would say, well, James here says that we shouldn't make plans in the future. We shouldn't say, well, we're going to do this in a year. But that's not what the text says. The text instead says how you should make those plans. In this last verse, in verse 15, it says, if the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or that. It says, if the Lord wills, we will accomplish these goals. It's not a question of whether or not we should be setting goals. It's a question of where we place our confidence when we do it. Am I saying that I am the one that's going to make these things happen? And that I can guarantee of my own volition that I will accomplish this task in a year, or that this will happen, or that will happen? And the answer is no, I can't do that. But through God, if my plans align with God's plans, then I actually am able to accomplish that. If my confidence is in God when setting spiritual goals or other goals, then they can be accomplished. So if we're looking at the idea of goal setting, and we recognize that it is important, and it's important for us as Christians to do this, then what do we need to know in order to make some quality goals? Well, let's start with this. There are two words that we use not really interchangeably, but whenever it comes to setting goals, we act as though one is the other. If I said that I had a goal, let's say one of the most common goals, in fact, I think it is the most common New Year's resolution. If you had to guess what that resolution would be, what would you say? Lose weight. How about that? So, if you say, well, I want to lose weight this year, that's great. That's great. You want to lose weight this year. Is that a plan? No, but I want to do it. Well, do you know the timeline of when you're going to lose this weight? Well, no, but I'd like to. Okay. You know how you're going to accomplish that? No, but I'd like to do it. What do we call that? We call that a wish. That's a wish that we would lose weight, not a goal that we're going to lose weight. There's a big difference between those things. A goal with no plan is a wish. I just wish that this thing would happen. So it has to be a few things. There's actually a more extended list of this that makes a nice acrostic of SMART, but we left out a couple for time's sake. But we will look at a few things here that are pretty important when we're setting these goals. Number one is specific. Okay? So let's say, for example, that I say that I want to be a better Christian. Is that a good goal? Sure, of course it is. I want to be a better Christian. Is that a specific goal? No. Why is it not specific? Well, I want to be a better Christian. Okay, well, I want to be better with finances. Is that specific? Well, I want to eat better. Is that specific? No. It's not specific enough. The question is, what am I going to be doing? How am I going to even know that that's the case? That's part of the measurable as well here. But does that mean I want to be a better Christian by praying more? That'd be a good thing. That's specific enough. I want to improve my prayer life. I want to pray this many times a day for this amount of time. It sounds a little clinical, but it may be necessary to set it up in that way. Or maybe it's studying that we want to improve upon. Or maybe it's visiting with those who are shut in or just others who are Christians. But it needs to be a little more specific than just saying, generally speaking, I want to be a better Christian. We wouldn't even know how to gauge that, and that's where measurable comes in. Well, I want to be a better Christian, but how will you know when you are? You have to take a baseline first and say, well, this is where I'm at in the area of prayer. This is where I'm at in the area of study. This is where I'm at in the area of visiting. If we can do that and we can say, I will improve these things, then we can come back at the end of a year or at the end of 5 years or whatever the period is and say, have I improved? So it has to be specific and measurable, and then it has to have a time limit. Well, I want to be a better Christian. When? Well, sometime. Before I die, I guess. 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I'd like to be a better Christian. It has to have a timetable with it. I will suggest that a year is a pretty good timetable. There's a reason that we make New Year's resolutions. There's also a reason that we don't keep them, but the New Year's idea there is pretty good. 12 months is a pretty good amount of time to really make progress in any given area, a specific area, and it's a good time limit to set for your goal. To say, okay, well now by 2022, well, that seems really far in the future. But by that date, I will be a better Christian in this area and this area specifically, and I will measure that out by these individual metrics that I'm using. Now, of course, once we have that plan in place, then everything that happens after that depends on effort. Now, effort is a very biblical concept. It's found throughout the Bible, and a good definition is given for it here in Galatians chapter 6 and verse 7. It says, do not be deceived. God is not mocked, for whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. In this passage, I like how it starts because it says, do not be deceived. That doesn't mean someone else is going to deceive you. It means do not deceive yourself into thinking that you will reap anything besides what you sow. It's saying that whatever amount of effort you put into something, that's exactly what you will get out of it. And that's true with goals as well. So if my goal is to become a better Christian, but I don't put any effort into that, then I'm not going to change. And let me tell you the sad truth, which is that most Christians do not progress in their Christianity because they do not have the motivation. They don't have the desire, and therefore they don't put in the effort. But desire goes right alongside this. 2 years ago, some of you will remember this example because it's an example about myself. But the example is this. If you're talking about effort and you're talking about desire and you're talking about goals, if I had a goal to eat more green beans, would I progress toward that goal? Never in a million years. Why? Because I don't even like how they smell. So if I don't even like how they smell, if I'm not interested, if I don't have a desire to eat green beans, will I ever put forth the effort to try it? It's just not going to happen. But again, too many Christians do not grow because they just don't have the desire to do so. Alongside this, when we set up some of these goals, especially when we're talking about this goal of I want to be a better Christian in general, you can ask a lot of questions to help refine what your goal is supposed to look like. Maybe the question is, do I pray more now than I did last year? I don't know what the answer is for you specifically, but you can ask that question. Or have I talked to more people about Christ this year than I did last year? Or have I talked to less people about Christ than I did last year? Am I visiting more people? Do I understand more about God's word or his will? Do I look more like Christ than I did last year? And those are all individual questions, but if we start to ask those kind of questions, we can start to refine what our goal of I want to be a better Christian should look like. Here's one more principle in goal setting. This comes from Warren Buffett, who happens to be a multi-billionaire and fairly successful by worldly standards. But in his idea of setting goals, he says that whenever he goes to set goals, whether that's New Year's resolutions or whatever it may be, that he'll make out a list of all the things that he would like to get better at or that he would like to accomplish or whatever it is. And it might be a list of 15 or 20 or 30 items. That's a lot to get done. So what he does is he crosses off all of them except 5. He leaves 5 that are the most important 5, and then he numbers them in order of importance. Why? Because multitasking is difficult. And if you put a little bit of effort here and a tiny bit of effort here and here and here, then you've not tried to put all of your effort into any one thing. So you'll reap what you sow, which is just a little bit in all of these different areas. And maybe you've improved a little bit in this and a little bit in that, but you could have been leaps and bounds better in just 2 or 3 areas than trying to do all of these things at once. So priorities should drive what our goals are that we want to accomplish first. There's time for all of these goals potentially to get done, but we have to have priorities. So the question is then, what are my goals? Well, that's where this nice outline and handout comes into place. So on this handout, like I said, there's an outline of what we've talked about so far, but then there's also this section at the bottom where we have a format of I will do blank by blank by blank. Okay? Well, that's a little bit confusing, but it goes with the 3 things that we said, the specific, the measurable, and the time limit. So if I say, I want to be a better Christian, I'd have to leave the rest of that blank. But if I say instead that I want to improve my prayer life, actually let's go with Bible reading. I think that's an easy enough one. If I say I want to, or I will, not I want to, it's not a wish, but I will read not just more of the Bible, but let's say specifically, I will read through the entirety of the Bible. How will I do that? Well, maybe I'll print out a checklist of a day-by-day, this is what you're supposed to read each day. Easy enough. Or maybe I'll use an app that keeps track of it for me with a Bible reading plan, and that would be the first and second blank now filled in. I will read through the entire Bible by use of an app or by use of a printed out page, and I will do this by when? Well, if I'm going to read through the Bible, maybe I want to do that in 1 year. Maybe I want to do that in 2 years. Either one of those is fine. But if I will write it out in this way, it should be easy enough for me to actually visualize this goal, not just a general, I want to read a little bit more of the Bible, but I want to read this specific amount. And it doesn't have to be the whole Bible to start with. It could be the New Testament, and I want to read that in 6 months. Or it could be, I want to read just the first 5 books of the Old Testament. I want to do that in a certain time frame. But it should be specific, it should be measurable, and it should be a time limit should be set on it as well. Now, these goals could be any number of things. And I don't know exactly what it is that you would like to improve on in your life. But I do know as Christians, there is always room for improvement in our lives. We spend our lives trying to get more and more like Christ, failing and failing even till the day we die. But we can get closer, and we can grow, and we should grow. But there are different areas that we could focus on, even when it comes to spiritual goal setting. We can talk about our personal lives. So in our personal lives, maybe it is that we want to improve our Bible reading or our study, our individual study of the Bible. Or maybe it's that we want to be able to be a teacher. We want to become a teacher for the church. Or we want to be able to give an invitation on Wednesday nights or whenever that may be. Or maybe we want to actually be able to prepare and present a lesson. Maybe we want to improve our singing as an individual or become a song leader. Maybe we want to evangelize more or give more. Give more of our time, give more of our money. Maybe we want to be a mentor to young Christians. Maybe we want to be someone that will get out of our comfort zone and be willing to be more Christ-like in doing so. So it could be that we have personal goals, but they are specific, they're measurable, and they have a time limit. Maybe they are goals for our family. Do we want our family to be closer to God? Well, we have that choice in front of us. We can choose to make that happen, or we can choose to do nothing and ensure that our family is no closer to God than they were last year. I don't think any of us would choose that intentionally, but it's very easy to do unintentionally. To not make a plan, to not have a goal, and for our family to not progress. So maybe we want to improve our studying as a family, or maybe we want to put nothing else before God, make Him the first priority. Or maybe we want to spend more time visiting other Christian families or individuals or those who are shut in. Or maybe we want to spend time hosting meals or whatever it is. But as a family, we can set goals, not just as individuals. And of course, the third area would be congregational. When we're talking about congregational goals, that's something that comes through the eldership. It should come through the eldership. And when we look at those goals, we can talk about growth, of course. We can talk about reaching out into the community. We can talk about helping those members that we already have to become more involved or become more knowledgeable about Christ or whatever it is. But those things take the same level of planning, the same level of action as individual goals do, or family goals. And those things have to be in place. This morning, I'll use 2 examples because one's with myself and one's with Keith. So that'll work out great. That way I'm not just criticizing one of us. So, dangerous waters. But this morning, whenever I was praying as we opened services, I prayed that we would grow as a congregation. I think most of us do that. But in reality, if I just pray for growth, do I have a plan? Is it measurable? Is it specific? Is there a time limit? This morning after the Lord's Supper, whenever Keith was speaking, he said that he hoped for growth this year in 2021, this coming year. And certainly we hope for growth as well. But again, we have to have a specific, a measurable, a time-limited plan. And that's what we intend to do. Now, with that, how can we accomplish that? Well, we can set up a program of work that's in the works right now. We can set up a Bible curriculum for all of the children's classes, which is also in the works. We can work toward appointing new elders, which we're working for. We can grow then also as individuals. This is something my granddad likes to do a lot. He likes to do a little math problem where he says if everybody would grow by 10%, how much growth would there be in a whole congregation? Let me scale that back a little bit, but then let's do some math as well. If this year, each one of us were to set goals. Now, I've got enough spaces for 5 goals on that page. Doesn't mean you're limited to that, but like we said, we can't multitask too much on this. But if each one of us were to set 5 goals and actually write them out, which a lot of us aren't even going to do, but if we would write them out, and then if we would accomplish them, maybe not even all 5, but just 2 or 3 actually got done per person. And let's say that improved each individual by 5% as a Christian, as an effective minister of Christ. If each of us improved by 5%, does that mean that the congregation improves by 5%? That's not how math works, right? It doesn't mean the congregation improves by 5%, but 5 times 60 people. The congregation improves by some 300% by each one of us improving just that much. A lot of growth is personal, and a lot of growth, even on the personal level, can have a ripple effect on the whole of the congregation. If you want the congregation to grow, it starts with you. If you want the congregation to grow even just a little bit, it's going to mean that you need to grow just a little bit as well. So when we're looking at this and we're setting these goals, another question we can ask, and this is how there's a section on your handout underneath those 5 blanks there that asks these questions of where do we want to be as a Christian in 1 year, in 5 years, in 10 years, in 50 years? Where do we want to be? If you want to be exactly where you are, then you can crumple that paper up and you can throw it away, and that'll work out just fine. If you want to grow, though, you could actually write out some goals and start working toward accomplishing those. Now, some of you may say, well, I don't know if I'll be here for another 50 years. Well, in reality, I don't know either, but I do know that we can have a lasting impact on our family for the next 50 years. I know that we can have an impact on this congregation for the next 50 years, even if we aren't here for all of them. But we can make an actual effort, we can make plans and goals that maybe we won't even live to see get accomplished, but that this church can and that our family can. The ironic thing is, with this whole lesson, is that we did this exact lesson just about 2 years ago. It was actually on the 3rd of December, back in 2018. And we took a look at this exact outline. You had that exact outline in your hand, that exact handout, the same page. You might even still have it somewhere tucked away in a Bible. But how much have you grown in the last 2 years? If you grew a lot, great. We're happy for you. If you didn't grow as much as you'd like to, did you ever fill it out the first time? And this isn't a pitch for myself. I'm not saying that you should fill this out and that will help me somehow, but it'll help you, and it'll help this congregation as a result. I said, actually I'll just read it to you because I find it kind of ironic and I didn't even change the wording here. So I'll read this verbatim. It says, set goals or don't grow. It's that simple. If you don't write them down, I'm sorry for you because you will wake up in 2020 the same person that you are now. Well, guess what? We're now at the end of 2020. And if you didn't set goals back in 2018, you didn't grow. And if you don't set goals in 2020, when we get to 2022, and I preach this lesson again, because I will, Lord willing, should add that part, we'll look at that passage. But if I preach this lesson again in 2 years, will you have grown by that point? If not, it's on you. If not, it's on me. So this evening, we want to grow. There's no better way to start growing, of course, than to giving our lives over to God. This evening, if you need to give your life over to God for the first time, if you need to rededicate yourself to God, it's a great time to do that as well. If there's any way that we can help you, we want to do that. If there's anything that we can do to help you accomplish or to set these spiritual goals, then we want to do that. Don't let this year be a wasted year. Even though it's been a bad year, I suppose, in a lot of ways, don't let it be a wasted year. And certainly don't let next year be a wasted year as well. But if there's anything that we can do for you, we ask that you come forward as we stand and as we sing.